and it basically, these things are edible, these things are not. You know, that type of thing as far as what we did. I mean, they didn't take us out and dump us out and say, you got to get back here in 3 days. You know, we'd already been through that type of thing. We knew how to read maps and compasses and figure out where we were and whatnot. That was not the type of survival it was. It was, here, now we've got you in this tropical climate. Here is what that you can survive on, and here's what you can't. And those type of things that we were learning there. And I don't remember how long it was. It seemed like it was maybe a week, maybe 10 days. I don't remember.
What did you think about being put into this tropical environment all of a sudden? I mean, the heat, the...
That didn't really bother me.
Bugs, the snakes, the...
You know, I expected it. You know, we already knew enough about that area to know that we could expect that.
Yeah.
But you got to remember that Vietnam is not all wet, damp jungle. There are
Right.
highlands and whatnot, and the areas that surround Vietnam are not all dense jungle. There are different types of terrain, like down in the south part where I never was stationed. It was what they called the Delta.
Mm-hmm.
It was a lot of flooded, swampy areas, where up in the north part where we went out, it wasn't.
Okay.
There was some along the river basins and whatnot, but there was not as much as what there was as far as swamp. But it was all hot, and it was all, don't get me wrong, there wasn't a lot of temperature variation.
It was hot. Hot and hotter.
And it was wet, damp, muggy climate.
When you got to Vietnam, you got off the plane, I assume you went on a plane. What was the first impression that you had when you got off the plane over there?
I think you look around wondering where the war is, because there's all these people going here and there not paying attention to anything. I mean, it's just like a regular base that might be in the United States as far as what people are doing.
Where did you go into when you landed in Vietnam? Where was it?
We went into Cam Ranh Bay,
Okay.
Tan Son Nhut area, and then we went north. But we had some briefing, what they call in-country briefing there, and they sent my group went to an Air Force intelligence headquarters in Da Nang area.
I've heard a lot of people say that one of the most vivid memories of getting off the plane was the smell. You didn't have a problem with that where you landed? Because
yeah, you could smell.
There were some places that, people said it was so horrendous that it would almost make you sick.
It was offensive until you got used to it, then you just didn't notice it anymore. It was offensive probably for a period of a couple of days, a week maybe. Other times it seemed like it was worse, that you might notice it again, but it was there all the time.
Mm-hmm.
It's just that you got acclimated to it. You learn to acclimate yourself physically to separate out the things that are normal. Causes you to distract yourself. So you learn to accept what's normal, and you aren't distracted by it. Therefore, you can smell a man smoking a cigarette 100 yards away if
Right.
you're used to the odors that are going to be normal.
Right. So you got over there, what did you start to do when you went over there? I mean, you didn't go through any other training once you got there, you just, with your
Briefings.
unit?
Once I was assigned to my unit, which was a second Black Tiger unit, we were...
Second Black Tiger?
Yeah, we were called the Black Tigers. The Air Force Special Forces were called the Black Tigers. And maybe because our berets were black, I don't know. But my briefing was by CIA and intelligence people as to what our missions were which we were to establish safe villages for downed pilots who were going to be flying missions over the north, and we were establishing safe villages in Laos and Cambodia for those people to get into if they were shot down.
Now, what did you do? You said establish a safe village. What did that involve?
We would go into the village, and usually we were carrying a CIA person with us, who we were his support. He was to talk the village leader into letting their village be a safe village.
That was
we
the
would
CIA
give
person?
them, yeah, that we would give them certain supplies, rice. We would give them meats. We would give them some weapons to protect themselves from communist troops. We would give them a means to communicate with us by radio if they got a downed pilot. They would be told if there was a downed pilot in the area to get out and try to find him and get him back. He was supposed to be trying to find them. They were supposed to try to find him and get him into their village, where he could be hidden safely. And that doesn't necessarily mean he was actually in the village. He might be just outside the village being hidden.
Mm-hmm.
But that they knew where he was so that we could come and get him.
Okay.
And some of the villages that were agreeable to doing this were actually agreeable because they were politically sympathetic to our side of the cause, and some were agreeable to doing it simply because the leader said you will do it. The village leader said you will do this because he was getting paid by us to see that. None of them were safe as far as we considered them actually safe. They were safe only as much as it was a place that we felt like we could make a contact and get the pilot out quickly, because there was always somebody in that village who was sympathetic to the other side.
Sure, I would imagine that there would be. That's what I was going to ask, is how, I mean, obviously the CIA person had some intelligence on which villages were more likely to cooperate, but you still think there's probably also going to be people in any village that are for the other side.
Right. And that was basically why we had to get them out fast. If somebody from that village was going to tell the other side that there was an American pilot in this village, it would still take time to get that message to them, and they would respond to it trying to capture that pilot. We had to be there first and get him out. Mm-hmm. And that's why we were located the way we were, in quick strike teams, usually 5 to 7 men, and located. I would be out for 12 to 14 days in a position to reach any one of 3 or 4 villages very quickly once we knew there was a downed pilot in the area. Mm-hmm. And we would call in our escape to a certain LZ to get out of there with that pilot, a lot of times before we even had the pilot in hand.
Wow.
Because it took a while for the choppers to get to us. Mm-hmm. Once we were lifted, we had a pilot in hand. That village may never be ever used again.
It would not be?
It may never be. Most likely would not be, but it could be.
Okay.
But see, once you lift one out, then they probably already know that that was a village. And the villages were rolled over. They were actually attacked by the Pathet Lao. And the NVR, when they were in that area, they would attack those villages and make them pay a heavy price for having helped us. Mm. So if we went back to that village looking for support again, we might not find it. Right. Most likely would not. However, if we were able to bring that pilot out quickly and nobody knew that we got him out of there, that village would say, we got another pilot down in the area, we're going to go get him because we're going to get some money out of you all. And we bought pilots back. Mm-hmm. We carried in as high as $25,000 in gold bars to bring back
Oh,
pilots.
my goodness. You carried that with you?
Yes.
Out in the jungle, gold bars.
We didn't have it there until they told us we're going to have to buy this guy back. And then they would,
How would you know if you would have to buy the pilot?
the contact made by the villagers. See, sometimes pilots were down 2 or 3 days before they would make it to a village because they went down in the north and got across the border to Cambodia or Laos to a safe village. They were made to the pilots were made to memorize safe village locations that would be in the vicinity that they would fly.
Okay.
In other words, if you're flying over in this quadrant, if your bomb mission is whatnot going to put you in this quadrant, your closest safe villages are here, here, and here. Memorize these locations. Because they couldn't carry any information on them as to where a safe village was.
Right.
Because if they were killed and crashed and that information was on them or in their plane, so they had to just memorize these locations. Well, they go down, it might take them 2 or 3 days of moving at night and hiding during the day to get to a safe village. But if the safe village knew they were down, they would go across the border into the North Vietnam side and bring them out.
Okay.
And if they did this, they expected more money.
Sure.
And a lot of times money for just a village leader was paid in gold, where the village itself, if they were all involved, might be paid in commodities of rice, food, goods and whatnot.
Interesting.
And it was up to us to get to that pilot before that any opposing forces might turn him over to the north as a POW.
Sure.
And they were out buying our pilots too.
The other side was?
Yes.
Oh, God. Okay, highest bidder, this pilot is, do I hear $2,000?
Sometimes they were buying him by intimidation, and sometimes they were buying him by cash. Or food goods, or arms. Arms was a big market thing because they were sellable everywhere. So you didn't have to trade in money, you could trade in arms. And believe me, our CIA did that.
Did they? I can't say that I'm surprised.
Don't forget that at that time, even though that I was not aware of for some time, there was a lot of drugs moving too. And the CIA was taking advantage of that.
A lot of drugs. Did you have a problem with drugs at all in your unit?
One guy that I knew of in my unit, the second time I was over there, was involved in drugs. The other guys, and I, myself included, I tried a little of that smoke weed. It freaked me clear out. I was in Da Nang at the time, and we were on a chopper pad just right outside of Da Nang called Ben Tui. And I decided I'd try this shit. We were sitting on a bunker, and Charlie threw a few rockets in, and we just sat there and laughed at him.
After smoking this stuff?
After smoking this stuff. And the next day I thought how stupid I was, that I didn't even go inside the bunker or nothing, just sat there on top of it and laughed at Charlie. But I thought, I don't think I'll do any more of that shit, and I never did.
Good for you.
But there were people who I'm sure had real drug problems that I was aware of, the people, but they weren't necessarily in my outfit.
The relationship that you had with people in your unit, what was it like? Like your relationship with both your peers and your superiors?
The relationship was very difficult. At first you wanted everybody to be pals. But as you lost guys and had to replace them, you began to feel like you didn't want to feel that way about the next guy that died. So you were close, but you were keeping a push-away distance. You didn't say, I don't want to be your friend. But you didn't actually become as close as you were with the first guys you went with.
Okay. What about the officers? Did you think they were generally competent? Did they treat you well? Were they generally incompetent?
Well, They were competent in the sense that they knew what we had to do and they were a part of it, and there were some officers who went through the same special forces training that we did. But they were not as, I guess, I don't know, how do you describe it? They weren't as mission oriented as we were.
Mm-hmm.
We were mission oriented in the sense that we felt like that what we were doing was a difference in life and death in somebody out there. They never gave us their opinion that that's what they felt like. They felt like that we were just doing a job.
Mm. I'm surprised because most of the pilots that would be down were officers, so you'd think that they would be...
I know, and I know what you're saying, but it just it didn't seem that way. But you got to remember that most of these guys were intelligence officers. They weren't really looking at things the same way as I mean, we were an intelligence outfit doing a job that really wasn't intelligence. We weren't just gathering intelligence. We did that, but we weren't just doing that. To me, our real mission was to be able to maintain control of a village or several villages within a certain area that we could depend on them to help us bring those pilots home.
How much, if ever, did you come actually like face-to-face and have to do any face-to-face combat with the other side?
Shooting somebody at 50 yards is not hard.
No, but if they're like right up, probably fairly close to you.
You try to avoid that. You try not to let them get that close to you.
Yeah, I'm sure.
But if it happens, and it does, you tend to change how you feel about what you're doing in the sense of when you're killing somebody. The man that stuck his knife through my arm right there, he died right face to face with me.
Oh.
And it changed how I felt about when somebody dies.
Mm-hmm.
It's one thing to look at a dead body that's already dead, but it's another thing to see him die. And that changed a little bit about how you feel about it. It doesn't change the fact that you're killing somebody. It's just that they tend to have more of a face once you kill somebody up close.
Mm-hmm.
They tend to become more human.
Did you have to do that very often?
Only twice did I ever actually kill somebody that close. I tried to avoid that as much as possible. You kill them before they get close.
Yeah. So your first time there, you were there for how long? Were you there for a full year?
Yeah. Full year the first time.
Doing this same thing, doing the safe villages and stuff.
That was all I did in the first time that I was there, was the safe village students.
Then you came back to the States?
Yeah, then I rotated back, and I had been promoted to staff sergeant, E5.
Mm-hmm.
I went to Fort Polk as a training instructor, as they told us that some of us would.
So you're training new recruits?
New Air Force recruits. We're using the Army facilities, but we're training Air Force recruits.
Mm-hmm.
And they don't have to put up with being called junior birdmen by the drill instructors.
Okay.
And we are no longer basically under any Army command at that point. We are using their facilities. We're sharing facilities with them as far as the barracks and the obstacle courses and the classrooms and whatnot. And our guys are going to some of the same classes with Army instructors, but the actual training instructor in charge of that group is Air Force, and the Air Force is providing some of the classroom people.
So that's what you were supposed to do, is train
Right.
guys.
I was in charge of a group of trainees, and you are then somewhat responsible for who makes it through school and who doesn't.
Mm-hmm.
And you try to give them the benefit of your experience. And I was not good at that. And after a few months, knocked a troop on his ass, and I got busted back to an E4.
You knocked somebody who was somebody you were supposed to be training?
Yes. He had a smart attitude, like he had already been through enough training when I got there to believe that he was kind of a badass, and he didn't realize that he wasn't ready yet for what he was going to face. And I tried to get the point through, and he ran his mouth too much. And he would have been a person who might have gotten somebody killed by not following orders, thinking he was smarter than the rest. And I had to do something to get this boy to realize that he could cause somebody else's death by his stupidity, so I ended up putting him on his butt. And because that's technically illegal, I got busted.
So you went from an E5 down to an E4?
Yeah.
Lucky you only lost one rank.
Yeah, I just lost one. And they asked me for reasons why, and I told them reasons why. And then they informed me that my commander informed me that he was going to have to take a stripe away in order to keep me from being court-martialed. And if I was agreeable to that, he would see that that's as far as it went. And I said, okay, do it, and send me back to Vietnam.
So you asked the second time to go back?
Yeah.
Why?
I felt like that if these pricks that I was trying to teach in this school were what we were going to be sending over there, I better get over there first and see if I could save a few butts before they got there.
Get over there and stop the war before the rest of them come over.
And at that time, it did not occur to me that at one time I was that dumb and naive. Yeah. It didn't occur to me that I had been like them. What occurred to me was that I didn't think those guys would ever be prepared for what they were going to face. And I thought, it's better for me to go over there. I can survive this. I know what's going on over there. They don't. And not that my going would stop any of them from going when they were through training, but more that I felt like that I could do something that they couldn't do there. It would take them too long to learn a lesson, and too many of them would die trying to learn that lesson. Because once you've been through enough to survive, you've lost a lot of your numbers already.
Yeah, yeah, sure. So when you went back, did you go back with the same basic unit or doing the same job?
I was in with the 1st Black Tiger unit instead of the 2nd, and my mission was changed. I was in more of an intelligence capacity. I was still in Cambodia and Laos most of the time. I went into North Vietnam several times. We were locating supplies going up and down the trail and calling in bomb strikes. It was a little different type of situation in that we had to observe what damage was done and decide if there was another strike to be made. And that left us in the area fairly close to where the bombing was going on. Certainly we tried to make sure that the pilots didn't put it on us, but it also left us vulnerable because they know the bomb strikes were being put there because somebody was observing what was going on. So they're out hunting for you. And it was smaller teams, 3 to 5 men. And it was much more strenuous mentally and physically because you were a lot of times under pursuit, being pursued, trying to get to an LZ to get the hell out of there, or trying to get to a place where they had lost you and couldn't find you, and that was very difficult to do. They were better at what they were doing in their own jungle than we were.
Sure.
So most of the time it was trying to get to an LZ where you could get out. and that meant get far enough ahead of any pursuit to get a chopper in. And that was difficult, and we lost a higher percentage of our people in that type of work than we did in the other, in returning down pilots.
When, were you there again the second time for a full year, or?
No, I was there for about 8 months.
8 months?
And we were on our way upriver. We had been back to Bentui and debriefed, spent a couple of days there, and we're going back upriver to be dropped again, and we had our chopper, there was 2 choppers going up, 2 choppers, loads of us, and our chopper was hit by a handheld surface-to-air missile, rocket actually, and it started spinning, it was going down, we were over the river. My attempt was to jump into the river, but the spinning motion threw me out to the river bank. And I lit in the river bank, and the impact was enough to cause me to have what they call a compression fracture in my back, and I was partially paralyzed. The second chopper hit didn't go down, it actually landed on the river bank and picked up those of us who survived. 2 out of the 9 on that chopper survived.
Only 2?
Yeah, and they got us out, and I was taken to 3rd Field Hospital, and from there I was airback to Japan. They did a surgery on me in Japan. It was minor surgery, just to try to relieve the pressure that was causing. Part of the paralysis was from the swelling and whatnot from the fracture. And they immobilized my back and put me on I don't know, I always called it a wheel bed. It was a bed that had a big wheel thing over the top, so they could stand me up.
Yeah, I've seen those before.
I was strapped to a board, but they could stand me up on this thing. And they put me on that and put me on another airback plane and brought me to Walter Reed.
And that's in Texas,
It's
right?
in Maryland.
Oh, Walter Reed's in Maryland, okay.
And I was there for 13 months.
At Walter Reed, recovering.
And then they told me I was no longer fit for military service and discharged me. And I really had intended to stay. I had already re-upped and had intended to stay.
And so this was, by then, what was the year? When you finally...
When I finally got out was 69.
69, okay. So you were...
But I had already re-upped. My first enlistment still had time left on it when I re-upped. You could do that then, and you got a little bonus for doing it.
So when you finally got out of the hospital, where'd you go? Go home?
First, I went home for a few weeks. I had been visited while I was at the hospital by some friends of mine who had gotten out of the service prior to my time. And they were going to school at the University of Tennessee, and they came to visit me up there and said, man, when you get out, why don't you come down to UT, you know? Go to school.
Big orange.
And that was really my intent, was to come down here to go to school and then maybe go back home or something. I didn't know what I was going to do at that point. But I came here, and they were renting a house over off Kingston Pike. And I went to, enrolled in school. I had already sent my application in before I was ever discharged from the hospital and the service and whatnot. And had been accepted and all that, and started to go to school at UT. And I kind of liked Knoxville too. When after I got here, I kind of got used to what was here and where things were, what was going on. I thought, you know, it was a pretty nice town. I would have probably stayed in school, but I felt very uncomfortable. The political climate here had changed so much, and people were so anti-war that I didn't feel comfortable.
Knoxville, it was bad in Knoxville?
Yeah, this was in I started school in January 7th.
January 1970.
And it just didn't, I didn't feel like I belonged there. I didn't like the attitude of the people. I didn't like the baby killer thing. Even though I was approximately still close to the age of group of people that I'm talking about, I felt like an old man in the midst of them.
Mm-hmm.
They were so young and full of shit that they didn't know.
Yeah, and you've had so much experience that they
Yeah.
couldn't even begin to understand.
And they had no idea what they were talking about. They were having theoretical life is what they were doing.
Mm-hmm.
They were theorizing that life should be like this. They didn't know what life was. They didn't know what death was. They didn't know shit.
Still don't.
And they,
for the most part.
And they don't, and they didn't realize how close they were to finding out.
Mm-hmm.
Especially those that were a little too vocal or a little too pushy to somebody whom they knew to be a veteran. And we were easily identifiable. We had short hair. We had different carriage. We carried ourselves differently. We were military. We didn't slump. We didn't swagger in the sense that we just walked.
Mm-hmm.
And then we didn't have, we had what they call military bearing that made us easily identifiable.
Right.
And some people made the mistake of saying too much, and they don't know how close they came to finding out what real life was.
By you personally, right?
By me personally. And I found myself in a position I felt like I was going to hurt somebody.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't need to be in that environment. So I left school.
How long? March 16th, 1999, an interview with Clifford Fitzsimmons, a Vietnam veteran. The interviewer is Leslie Zimmerman. Cliff, would you tell me just a little bit about your background, your family background, where you're from?
I was born and raised. I stayed because I felt like I owed it to the government because I was drawing my GI Bill money.
So that's why you stayed for a full semester?
Right. But it wasn't the right decision. I should have left within the first month or two.
And what did you do when you left?
I'd met a girl there that I liked, and I stayed here in Knoxville because of her. And I went to work with a construction firm, and I decided that I didn't want to work for them. I had a little money saved up from my service time, so I started building some houses. I bought a few lots and started building some houses.
Hmm.
And spec homes were selling good, especially out in the edge of Sevier County where Sevier and Knox come together, a place called Seymour.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where I was able to buy these lots at an auction, and I got the financing and built a few spec homes and started doing that. I enjoyed it and was making a little money at it, and still doing a little odds and ends, other things in the construction line to make a little extra money, and married this girl, and ended up staying here. And even though I was only married to her for 6 years or thereabouts, I stayed because we had a child, and I didn't want to live away from my child.
Mm-hmm.
And now I feel like Tennessee is my home.
Right, yeah. It's a great place. Yeah. Have you kept in contact with any of the men that you...
The guys that I came here to go to
with?
school with, I've kept in contact with.
You still friends with them?
Yeah. I still see them probably, well, two of the three I see pretty often. One of the guys, after he graduated from school, moved away. and I only see him once in a blue moon.
Mhm.
I come see him for a football game or something, and we get together, but it used to be more frequent than it is. It seems like as time goes by, it's less frequent that he comes in or tells us that he's here when he does come in. Or
Yeah.
something. The two guys that are in this area, I see probably one of them once a month.
Mhm.
One of them I probably see 3 or 4 or 5 times a month.
Well, that's good. It's a long time.
We go
Friendship.
drink a beer too, I guess, occasionally, you know. He'll call or me and say, you know, you want to go drink a beer or you want to go shoot some darts or something, and we'll go get together.
Were these guys that you were in Vietnam with, or just that you went through training with early on?
One of them had been in training at Keesler with that didn't go to Vietnam, never did serve in Vietnam. One of them I had been in training at Keesler with and went to Vietnam with.
Mm-hmm.
He went all the way through all the training with me. That's the guy I see regularly.
Mm-hmm.
One of them was a guy that I met in Vietnam. He was the administrative guy for General McGee.
Okay. Other than the difficulties that you had when you went to school, did you really have trouble adjusting back to civilian life after being in the military and being in combat situations? Because you hear about a lot of Vietnam veterans and other veterans of other wars, you know, that just have a tremendous amount of trouble and don't seem to be able to cope with.
I think there are those who do and those who don't cope well with their life afterwards, and I think a lot of it depends upon the individual. I think some of it depends upon, I was kind of what you call deprogrammed while I was at Walter Reed. I had a year to really look at the fact that I was not going to be in the service.
Mm-hmm.
The fact that the skills that I had learned to some degree were not going to be anything I was going to use ever again. So I may have adjusted better. I saw so many guys that were going to go out without arms and legs, that me going to be able to walk out. I felt pretty good about that, you know.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe I adjusted differently, but I didn't have a bad time except with the attitude of the people here not being behind it. I thought everybody in America was supposed to be behind their boys fighting overseas, and I couldn't understand why they weren't. When people talked about World War I or World War II or Korea,
Mm-hmm.
everybody believed those soldiers were good soldiers.
Right.
They didn't call them baby killers.
Yeah, and you wonder why the change.
Bomber pilots who flew from England over Germany and dropped bombs and killed thousands of civilians, they weren't called baby killers.
I know.
People who dropped bombs, the nuclear bombs, were not called baby killers in Japan.
Yeah, so why here?
So why were we? That part still bothers me.
Mm-hmm.
I still get very irritated when I hear people talk about how we were not ethical in our way of fighting the war in Vietnam. We fought the war the way the war dictated we fought it. We were never allowed to fight it the way that we wanted to fight it, because the war wasn't run by the military, it was run by the politicians.
Yeah.
And that part still bothers me.
Yeah.
But adjusting back to life, I don't think I had any real problems. I had flashbacks, but they weren't the kind of thing that, you know, I wasn't the guy who every time somebody popped a balloon, I hit the floor.
Yeah, you didn't really suffer from post-traumatic stress?
Not really.
No.
I didn't. I had bad dreams occasionally. I would have, and those have not been as frequent as they used to be. I would occasionally have what I call conscious flashbacks. see somebody and your mind flashes back to where you thought you saw somebody just like that before. Especially if it was a dead guy. That, you know, somebody who looks like a dead guy seems to cause or trigger a flashback sometimes. Sometimes it's almost just like your mind just kind of closes off everything else and this thought goes through your head, deja vu type thing. And then it's over, you know. And then you look at the person and you think, you're a dead man walking. You know, because they look just like somebody you saw. And that kind of thing happens once in a while. I mean, it's not often at all.
Well, you seem really well adjusted, so
I've made it.
You're not too psycho.
I've made it to be an old man.
Yeah. Well, Cliff, thank you so much. It's been really good talking to you and hearing your story and everything, and I really appreciate you
Do you
talking
find
to
out
me.
what you want?
I did, yeah, thank you.